As a Christian, I'm happy to discuss my faith in relation to the great challenge of global hunger. I believe that Christ's command that we serve the poor is reason enough to struggle on behalf of those without enough to eat. But there's another powerful reason to extend the fight against hunger and extreme poverty. Very simply, we know great progress can be made, and this should inspire us to increase our efforts. I was nurtured as a Southern Baptist, and I have taught Bible lessons throughout my life, including today at Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia, where my wife and I are both deacons. Yet I long have believed that equally devout Christians could pursue different worship and organizational customs and still practice our faith in harmony. All people of faith who take the Bible seriously, both the New Testament and the Hebrew text, very much agree that God's heart is with the poor and the vulnerable. Jesus proclaimed at the beginnings of his earthly ministry that he had come to bring good news to the poor. The Bible includes several thousand verses on the poor and on God's response to injustice. We Christians are acquainted, of course, with the familiar biblical parables, the outcast Lazarus, destitute and longing for crumbs from the rich man's table, and covered with sores, who is nonetheless embraced in the bosom of Abraham. That's in Luke 16:19 through 31. In the four Gospels, we're reminded 5 times how Jesus fed the hungry crowd with loaves and fish. And from Matthew, we receive an essential lesson from the day of judgment. Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, Jesus said, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. God calls to all of us, rich and poor alike. Recognizing the suffering of the poor and the encumbrances of wealth, Jesus has said, "Come unto me, all ye who are burdened and heavy laden, and I will refresh you." In the Old Testament, in 5 short sentences from Isaiah, carefully joined together, God speaks to all. And I quote again, "I have chosen you, I have called you by name. You are precious in my sight. You are mine. I love you." In these and other ways, the Bible reveals how central the demand for justice for the poor and the oppressed is to the very nature of God. When Jesus himself observed that the poor will always be among us, it was not to excuse indifference to the poor, but to emphasize that our faith finds its full meaning only in the unceasing commitment to justice. We live in a world of nearly 7 billion people. More than 2 billion of them are Christians, the greatest number of them living in the global South. Thus, in sprawling slums and isolated rural villages, one finds tens of millions of Christians among the world's poorest people. I point this out because although every person is a child of God, sometimes we Christians with rich blessings forget that the struggle to help the world's poor also is an effort to improve the lives of our fellow Christians. They number among the most vulnerable who suffer from hunger, disease, and illiteracy. They're among the 1 billion who go to bed hungry each night and who lack access to safe water. They, too, are denied the necessities and opportunities essential to shape productive, dignified lives. But we must not confuse God's demand for justice with a simple call to charity. Tangible actions by individuals and global commitments by nations are required to ensure justice and human rights for the least advantaged among us. And these commitments can reap results. 10 years ago, leaders of 189 countries met at the United Nations to sign the Millennium Declaration, an unprecedented global agreement to take concrete steps to lift human beings above the abject, dehumanizing conditions of extreme poverty and strengthen the foundations for development of all people by securing rights to education, food, and access to health care, among other basics. From that grew the Millennium Development Goals, or MDGs, as they are known, including the important goal to have hunger by 2015. Since these goals were set, we have reduced a portion of the developing world's population living in extreme poverty, those often burdened by hunger and malnutrition, from about half in 1990 to about 1/4 today. Even in Africa, where the threat of food insecurity may be the most persistent, people have shown that when they are empowered with the right tools and knowledge, they can dramatically transform their own lives. More than 24 years ago, through the Carter Center, I began working with the late Dr. Norman Borlaug on improving agriculture in 15 sub-Saharan African countries. At the time, famine ravaged the continent, and we focused on connecting local agronomists with farmers so that scientific advances could be brought to the fields more readily. Farming techniques could be improved, and post-harvest practices could extend the reach of food. The end result has been more than 8 million small-scale farmers, all of whom live in countries at risk for famine or malnutrition, have doubled or even tripled their crop yields. This is just one example of how some of the world's poorest people, with a comparatively small amount of help from their wealthy neighbors, are getting a better chance at meeting their most basic human needs and realizing their true potential. The Millennium Development Goals target poverty, hunger, and disease, while encouraging universal primary education and fairness for women and girls. They are backed by global consensus and have the strong support of all the world's major religious groups. Some have referred to the Millennium Development Goals as a Marshall Plan for the world's poor. Just as the Marshall Plan restored hope and opportunity to a war-shattered Europe after World War II, today the MDGs offer the same hope and opportunity to the least among us. The MDG program is achieving strong results. The effort rests on knowledge we already possess and relies on proven, effective implementation strategies. In these ways, the goals represent a sharp break from failed development approaches of the past. You may ask, how can I help? How can I join my passion and energy with this amazing work? One effective step you can take is to express your support of the Millennium Development Goals in a short letter to your member of Congress. A special Day One website, hunger.day1.org, includes a sample letter and many resources. You might also wish to visit the website of organizations including End Poverty 2015, or Bread for the World, or the Micro Challenge. In 2002, when I accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, I ended my address with these words, and I quote, "The bond of common humanity is stronger than the divisiveness of our fears and prejudices. God gives us the capacity for choice. We can choose to alleviate suffering. We can choose to work together for peace. We can make these changes, and we must," unquote. When we confront the scale of human need and know that we have the tools to make a difference, our obligation to do justice is all the more clear. We should feel a joyful resolve to press ahead. I have never been more optimistic about our ability to lift up our brothers and sisters and to change the world at long last.